July just ended. We're a week and a bit into August. We thought we'd talk through a couple books that we read in July that we really enjoyed. My book is A Life of One's Own by Joanna. The subtitle is 9 Women Writers Begin Again. This is a book that I had seen a lot in some of our local bookstores as staff picks or kind of highlighted on the front tables, and it caught my eye. And I kept thinking to myself that I needed to read it, and it's been like 9 months, and I just finally remembered to request it at the library. So this finally came in. I got to read it. It didn't take me very long, which was nice. But it's kind of nonfiction, academic-y research mixed with more memoir and personal history, I guess. Each of the 9 chapters follows one woman author kind of talking through her life story and her work and how the two informed each other. It was really nice to read a book that has its basis in fact and in research, but also had the kind of personal touches woven through. It made me feel like I had more of a connection to the artists or the writers that the author was talking about, and it kind of made it easier for me to grasp why I would want to read them, because learning about their lives, learning about who they were or are as people, kind of made me feel like I have more of a vested interest in reading their work and understanding even more about them. I need to check my notes. I appreciated the perspective that the author took, where she's talking about these women writers that she looks up to and that she admires, but she's also talking about what she was going through as she was reading their work, and that varies in time period, and some of them she's even read twice, so she kind of compares and contrasts what it was like reading them as a teenager, what it was like reading them as like a 30-something, and how where she is in her life and what she's going through informs her reading process and what she takes away from each writer and their work. And it's about these women writers. It's about being a woman who not only wants to write, but like wants to have her own life and her own purpose and wants to leave something behind. But I also found kind of this thread of like, when we are lifelong readers and when we have the privilege of reading things over again, or we have the privilege of reading an author's entire oeuvre, there's like lots of gifts that we receive as readers, and it's really special to think that the things we take from each book can change as time goes on, can change even from while we're reading the book to after we're reading the book, can change over time without even rereading, but just remembering things that books have taught us and how those lessons and teachings kind of apply to our lives wherever we are in the moment. And not that I think these women writers are like entirely accessible, but when you think about not just reading to read, but reading to get something from the books, I think you can go in kind of searching for what you connect with the most, and then those things become the most important things in the book. And I liked that a lot. It also reminded me of how many authors there are that I still want to read. I have a Virginia Woolf anthology that's been sitting on my shelf for 5 years, and all I've ever read is A Room of One's Own. And I would really like to be able to read Orlando and Mrs. Dalloway and To the Lighthouse. And same with Sylvia Plath, who I read in high school. I own Ariel. I've only ever read the poems through once. I would like to be able to read them with some attention paid to them and to kind of grasp more of what they're about and more of what I can take from them. And same with authors I've never read, like George Eliot. I always think of Middlemarch on my mom's bookshelves, and I look at it and I think, oh, I should borrow that and I should read it, and I never do. Toni Morrison is another one. I really liked The Bluest Eye. I would love to read Beloved. I would love to read more of her work in general. There are all of these incredible women. Simone de Beauvoir is another one. I don't know if I'll ever get to read The Second Sex, but it sounds like a nice goal in my head. All of these women who have like not only thought of these stories and written them for us, but have like poured their lives into their work and taught us things through their work. And it's probably a pipe dream that I'll read even like a fraction of these books, but just the fact that they exist for me to read eventually if I want to is exciting. The amount of books in general that exist in the world is exciting, and I didn't expect it to remind me of why I love reading so much, but it did. And something I really enjoyed was that this woman is talking about all of these writers that have impacted her life, and she's talking about grief and heartbreak and wanting to be a writer and not really knowing where to start or what to write. And she's talking about these very personal things, but they're also very human things, and even though they're subjective experiences, they're also kind of like experiences that all of us have. And so it was nice to feel kind of a personal connection with that. And she, the author, was accomplishing in her writing what all of those other authors gave to her by kind of expressing herself and her thoughts and her feelings and offering them for other people to read. And I thought that was really impactful and kind of a full circle moment, which was really nice. I will say that there were points where kind of the academic-y, like, history parts dragged on a little bit for me, and it felt more like stating facts than it did painting a whole picture of each woman or about each woman in the author's life and how they fit. But taking a step back, I don't actually think that took very much away from the book as a whole, and I still really enjoyed it. And even just like thinking about the book as we were getting ready to do this video, I think I realized that it had more of an impact on me than I fully felt after I finished. But yeah, I would really recommend it. I enjoyed it a lot.
So this month I read a book that was quite different from Hannah's book, the fifth book in the Anne of Green Gables series, Anne's House of Dreams. I've been really slowly but surely working my way through the Anne of Green Gables series. I think I reread the first book maybe like 2-3 years ago after having read it as a kid. And since then, every like half a year, I have introduced another chapter of Anne's life into my life. And this was one that I was anticipating quite a bit because I knew that some really big life events for Anne were coming up. The biggest takeaway, though, I have from this is that those life events are maybe the least focused aspects of the book. I'm not going to spoil too many of the important arcs that happen in the book, but the life events that you'd see coming if you read number 3 and 4 is that Anne and Gilbert get married at the beginning. They move to Four Winds and have their House of Dreams, which made me pretty jealous because I would love my own House of Dreams. And then near the end of the book, they have their first child. Jem is the child's name. Jem, Jem. Named after one of the characters, Captain Jim. The middle name is Matthew, so Matthew does not even get the first name of the kid, but this random Captain Jim,
Poor Matthew.
he gets the name of the kid. This was a departure from the last Anne book, which was a lot more filler, but it was similar in that most of the focus is based on these new characters that are introduced in the book. I already mentioned Captain Jim. There is Cornelia and Leslie, who is probably the most tragic character in the book and probably in the series. And she's the focal point for a lot of the plot, and she kind of becomes Anne's project in a way. where every Anne of Green Gables book, there's always somebody that Anne maybe at the beginning is interested in, but she misunderstands who they are, eventually learns not to judge people, and in some ways she leaves their life better off than how she found it. It's slightly different in this one because Leslie's life, like I said, is so tragic, where she is stuck in this loveless marriage with a guy who sailed the seas and got a traumatic brain injury, and then she has to take care of him. This is all introduced pretty early on, but it makes it a bit more complicated. And there's a moral dilemma that has to be solved about 3/4 of the way through the book. And that was the first time I've seen Anne have to grapple with something like that. She disagreed with Gilbert about it, and I think it represents overall a slightly more mature tone, a more real tone in this book than in the past. That's shown through multiple characters, I think, where in every Anne book there's always the older couple that didn't say what they meant when they were young, so they never got together, and then when they're older, finally Anne helps facilitate their eventual love connection. In this one, there's the Captain Jim character who his long-lost love died when she was young, so there's no fixing it. For Leslie, it's instead of just someone who made bad choices, it's someone who had these terrible life circumstances thrust upon her. Cornelia, who has a great catchphrase of "just like a man," she always tells these stories and about men in the town and says, "Ain't that just like a man?" She's more of a classic Anne character where she seems just very much of the Ellen Montgomery mold, and her arc in the book is a little bit more similar to some of the past characters. But Leslie and Jim are definitely different, and that gave this book kind of a new flavor for the Anne series. There's a moment about halfway through that is definitely one of the most heartbreaking moments in an Anne book. I'm not going to spoil that one. It sounds like I'm just throwing out all these spoilers, but trust me, the stuff that really matters, I am not giving it away.
Nobody's going to read it now.
Well, if you've read the first 4 Anne books, you can't skip Anne's House of Dreams just because I gave you some spoilers. The part about the marriage to Gilbert, that is not at all a spoiler, and what kind of made book 4 a filler, feel like filler, was that he proposes in number 3. He's not even in number 4. It's Anne. He's going off to medical school. Anne going, I think she goes to Summerside to be a teacher. And they're kept apart. So this is really a much anticipated chapter. The themes in this book, I mentioned the story is a bit more mature. The themes are more complicated than in past Anne books. I remember number 4 in particular was a lot about kind of taking advantage of life, saying what you mean, living in the present, that sort of thing. Pretty accessible themes. This one, I was trying, like Hannah said, thinking about the video made me think a bit more critically about the book. The themes are definitely less clear-cut. I had to sit down and figure out what the book was trying to say. A main idea that I took away from it, though, was just the role that religion plays in people's lives, especially at this time. Obviously, there's a ton of tragedy in modern day, and people get through it with religion, but there's a specific moment in this book where Captain Jim, I'm pretty sure, yes, Captain Jim, is talking to Anne after this really heartbreaking moment, and he says that we all tell ourselves these lies to get through the day. Or maybe, I don't think he used the word lies, but we all have these hopes. That it's kind of implied that it's these hopes of the future that aren't going to come true, but if we don't keep them in mind, then how would we ever be able to live our life? And then he mentions the ultimate hope is an afterlife, is heaven. But he says that is one hope that will come true. So while he's acknowledging that we all tell ourselves these things to make life a bit less painful, and kind of admitting that a lot of times it's just a mirage, he is also guilty of doing it himself. It's kind of hard to explain because it is a bit complicated in the book. There's lots of moments in this where terrible things are happening, or There's a housekeeper character who said she never got married even though she wanted to, and in the past where that type of character, it would have been because, you know, they didn't say what they meant or they let someone go, and that can be remedied. For this character, she very much had come to terms with the fact that her life hadn't gone the way she had wanted it to, and she said, well, that must just be God's plan. That just must be the fate that was left for me. So a lot of these characters seem kind of stuck in their situation, and it's more about making do with the hand that you're dealt, less so than in past Anne books when really the world was your oyster and you could make decisions that could change your life at any time. That isn't to say that this book was completely pessimistic about change. There definitely are some character arcs, and it shows that with the hand we are dealt, we can make things different. But still, it's acknowledging a lack of control that we all have in our stories. There's also some other themes about legacy and memory that are, I think, kind of ancillary to those more complicated themes. But all of this kind of contributed to making this book a bit more something to chew on than maybe, what was the last, number 4? I have my Anne stack, Anne of Windy Poplars, which was a cute, fun book, but I wasn't really staying up at night trying to figure out what it all meant.
This book kept you up at night?
Didn't keep me up at night. I'm kind of using hyperbole here. Yeah, so it is similar to a lot of the Anne books. All of them have these very familiar tropes, but it does take some diversions in very interesting ways. I'm always so interested in Ellen Montgomery, how she seems to shy away from what a lot of book series do, where they're just bringing back the same characters, rehashing the same old things. She almost seems allergic to doing that. She wants to always introduce a new batch of characters, and more what she's recycling are themes and ideas than the people. At the beginning of this book, a couple people from book 2 are brought back, some people from book 4 are referenced, and wait, am I having the numbers? No, this is book 5. What was book? Anne of... I'm totally forgetting what Anne of the Island was about. Oh, Anne of the Island was a great one. Oh, that's the one where Gilbert proposes. Yeah, let me bring it up. In the beginning of this book, with the wedding, some characters are actually brought back, which is pretty rare for an Anne book. But Paul from number 2 is brought back. The people from Anne of Avonlea, it's explained why they can't come back. Or Anne of the Island, it's explained why they're not coming to the wedding. These China dogs, Gog and Magog, I think their names are, from number 4, are gifted to Anne as a wedding gift, and she brings it to her House of Dreams. So this book definitely felt like this is one for the fans. Like, we're making references. It's always funny in the Anne books how the characters talk about their memories in a way like, I can't believe that blah 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 happened, or do you remember how this happened? And it's said in a way that's just a callback for book readers. But this definitely feels more like this is an Anne book for the sickos. Anne's House of Dreams. The final thing I'll say is the politics that they talk about in this book was really interesting, where in the past they've mentioned that Anne is a conservative, and many people in Green Gables are conservative. And it rubbed me a bit the wrong way because I'm very much not a conservative. But I was doing some research based on that, and I saw that back then, not only were the political parties different, but really in this time and in this place, supporting a political party is kind of like a sports team and less about the ideas that are behind it. So that was interesting to learn about. And there were a few funny references to like gender politics and women voting and stuff, because this book was kind of a period piece, or it was written like 15 years after the time period, or 20 years after the time period. And there were references about women voting, and it was done in a kind of a tongue-in-cheek way, and I figured that would have been a modern reference, where it's kind of winking at the audience that, oh, these people 15 years ago never could have imagined women voting. I've rambled quite a while. Overall, Anne's House of Dreams, I would say it's my 3rd favorite book in the series, which isn't bad, 3 out of 5. book 1 and 3. Book 1 is untouchable. I will eventually do a whole video once I finish the Anne series, because I still have 3 left, where I'm going to rank them all. I'm going to go through them. So you'll hear me talk about a lot of these things
Something to
again.
look forward to.
I've been trying to convince Hannah to read. You've read number 1.
I read number 1.
Which you enjoyed.
I did, but I read it when we were about to go to Prince Edward Island, so it kind of it
Right.
felt topical.
Yeah. I'm from Nova Scotia. I've spent a lot of time in PEI, so it's always topical. I have red hair, of course, so I have to support Anne. I'm working on convincing Hannah to read more, and I'm also working on finishing the last 3 in the series. I don't know if this recommendation will reach anyone, because if you've read the first 4, you should definitely read the first 5. But if you've only read Anne of Green Gables, the number 1, the Anne of Green
Keep
Gables
going.
book,
Keep
then I say
trucking.
keep going, keep trucking. That was our reading roundup. Hope you enjoyed it.